For the first time, I am proud to say that this video is sponsored by Paradox Interactive, who have provided me with access to the new Hoi4 DLC, Götterdämmerung, featuring new alternate history paths for Germany, one which we'll explore today, as well as new focus trees for Austria, Hungary, Belgium and the Congo, in addition to several new features. So if you're interested in all this, make sure to click the link in the description, where if you buy the DLC from there, you'll get the Steam key while also supporting the channel, as I will get a cut of the profit. But let's now jump into the video. 1933, the democracy of the Weimar Republic would collapse as the NSDAP and their leader Adolf Hitler came into power. 3 years later, our nation has been transformed, with economic stability restored compared to the time of the Great Depression and military rearmament having started. While the Versailles Treaty was imposed on us to stop this, through the implementation of MIFO bills, funding of the rearmament has been hidden at the cost of civilian economic growth. And with our army having reached 260,000 men, more than double the amount restricted by the treaty, Hitler has decided to remilitarize the Rhineland. However, with dissatisfaction against the Nazi regime, when the day of remilitarization arrived, the number of Wehrmacht generals rallied around the well-known Marshal August von Mackensen, who moved quickly, declaring a provisional government to depose Hitler and his party. And so the German Civil War erupted, with the Nazi regime in the east and the military junta in the west. Mackensen had rallied the nation against the government, being able to raise 24 Landsturm regiments to complement the 15 Wehrmacht divisions. 2 of these were panzer divisions under the command of Erich von Manstein, who will lead the first offensive in this war. Together with some infantry and the support of the Air Force, Erfurt was captured, which led to a major breakthrough in the region, allowing our light tanks to reach the Czech border only 11 days after the start of the conflict. And this means the enemy forces in Bayern are split off from Berlin. Being able to capture the supply hub of Nuremberg as well made the following offensives far easier. It consisted of first encircling maybe 7 divisions in western Franken state, who took some time to defeat, but with only minimal counterattacks from the enemy, we had all the time in the world. Turning further south, the rest of Bavaria was captured and its defenses were destroyed, leaving only northeastern Germany left to capture. During these battles, expatriated communists started returning home to support our war effort, but Mackensen, not aligning with their ideology, swept their return under the rug. He was, however, not able to stop the Social Democratic Iron Front from forming and becoming the main paramilitary group in our army. In the lands that were already occupied, significant denazification campaigns also took place, as both supporters and monuments were destroyed. Finally, with victory almost secured as the losses of the Reich far exceed ours, Mackensen has ordered the beginning of reconstruction of our nation. To his help, Hans Luther, former head of the Reichsbank, was appointed as economic minister, who immediately made economic growth the priority, in contrast to the Nazi regime's focus on remilitarization. And this means ending and repaying the MIFO bills, which will absolutely tank our short-term economic growth. But if further economic reforms follow, we could see a major economic miracle. But for this to become true, the civil war must end. Thankfully, with our Bavarian forces arriving to the northern front, we now greatly outnumbered the NSDAP government, so as we got our breakthrough, Berlin was quickly liberated and we could continue marching eastwards. Soon Hitler was found dead, but despite Heinrich Himmler stepping up to lead the Nazis, there was nothing he could do to stop their inevitable defeat. And once Breslau was captured, this defeat had become a reality, as the Nazi government had now been fully defeated. Their leadership, those who hadn't fled or already died, were all imprisoned for life, and since the civil war is now over, the Landsturm regiments were dissolved, while the paramilitary Iron Front were demobilized, but still kept around. And so, with war behind us, it is time to decide the future trajectory of our nation, as the military junta under Mackensen can't stay forever. But it did stay for a while longer, as it continued and doubled down on the reconstruction efforts. Significant public works were also started, like the Kaiserliche Autobahn in central Germany. Ludwig Erhard was also granted a ministerial position to help Hans Luther with reconstructing our economy once the MIFO bill payments have concluded. However, the reforms couldn't start just yet, because growing public dissident over the junta is forcing Mackensen to start to dismantle it. With high popularity of the Kaiser, both among the people and in the military, the choice of restoring the monarchy was a clear one. However, the Kaiserreich wasn't revived, because with popularity of the democratic parties having risen to an all-time high, Mackensen has been forced to make a compromise and instead create a constitutional monarchy. And soon enough, with public dissent at an all-time high, he declared the re-establishment of free elections and called one straight away. After a week of anticipation, the winner was declared to be the Deutsche Zentrumpartei with their leader Konrad Adenauer. And so, the new democratic Kingdom of Germany has become a reality. The first thing the new government did was continue the economic reforms started by the Junta. And with the MIFO bill repayments over, it is high time to begin implementing the reforms needed to recover our economy. It started with sweeping currency reforms, followed by lowering taxes to allow for more money spent down the line. With already a significant upswing in our factory construction, we could slightly switch our reform focus towards housing developments and worker rights, both to improve our economy but also to combat communist support. We then abolished price controls to let the economy float freely as it should and finished the reforms for now with significant investment into industrial expansion. So, with the economic miracle well on its way, Adenauer and his government instead turned to securing the democracy we have gained to stop another dictatorial party from ever gaining power again. We did this by banning public displays of political affiliation, which was an important propaganda element for both the Nazis and communists. Adenauer also adopted conservative values in the hopes to never return to the chaos of the Weimar Republic again, mainly with the help of another conservative economist, Carl Friedrich Götterdämmerung. But now with the economy mostly recovered and on its way to a miracle, as well as our democracy secured, the fun part begins. Foreign policy and preparation for war. Now you might question what war there is to prepare for. We are indeed a democratic nation, those usually don't go to war. Well, firstly, the Soviet warmongers are close by in our east, but secondly, and maybe more importantly, Adenauer and a growing faction of our political elite have dreamt up a concept of a unified Europe with Berlin in the center. To reach this goal will be difficult, however, as we are by far the weakest major power in Europe militarily. But before we work to change this, we will already begin with the first steps to a unified Europe, creating our faction Mitteleuropa and begin influencing the politics of the fascist Austria to gain the support of its people and hopefully allow for unification. While we wait, we can start restoring the military might of our country. Maybe the simplest way will be through research, and fortunately the brain drain which occurred with Nazi leadership has been reversed. Our first major military research project has already started, which is looking into super heavy howitzers. However, to keep up with the Soviets and Western powers, we need more experimental facilities and not only in land warfare, so we began construction on an aerodynamics and avionics facility outside of Breslau. But a strong army isn't only technologically strong, our doctrines need to keep up as well. Therefore, we started developing modern maneuver warfare, and since our army is so small at the moment, we will have a lot easier to adopt this new doctrine compared to the far more entrenched other major powers. As we started thinking whether to keep our Prussian legacy or adopt the new Panzer doctrine, our research on heavy howitzers had reached a new stage and a critical decision had to be made. One where we decided to focus on firepower. But before we return to the first decision to be made, support in Austria for annexation had grown significantly, so we moved our now 300,000 men army to the border and sent a request for Anschluss. With external and internal pressure, the Austro-fascist regime caved in and Anschluss was realized. Their industry and army were all integrated into our nation, as well as their scientists, helping us open up new research facilities. Returning to our military expansions, we switched construction of civilian factories to military ones, and with the research on super heavy howitzers complete, they are already put in production. With 3 being assigned per infantry division, they will greatly improve their soft attack and collateral damage. Regarding the question of infantry or panzers, with the success of Manstein during the Civil War, the choice was simple, especially as we've already started research on a new tank chassis. But this won't be enough, so further research will also be done. While this development continues, we will return to foreign policy. So far, if we don't count the annexed Austria, we are completely alone in our faction. Fortunately, we have one democratic neighbor who could ally us, the industrious Czechoslovakia, and they were more than happy to join our alliance, forming unbeknownst to them the start of our plans for a united Europe. So, with an ally on our side, we can take our first steps to what could lead to war, restoring our claims on the Brest-Litovsk borders. While some instead wanted us to ally the eastern states and help them against the Soviets, with none being true democracies, it would clash with our European goal. But for us to begin demanding back our eastern states, we need a stronger army. Thankfully, the infantry part of it is already developed, with 24 heavy infantry divisions deployed and 24 light divisions in training. And while we wait for our tanks to finish development, we can turn to another just as important part of our upcoming war machine, the Luftwaffe. Since it's severely outdated, we need to modernize it as well as expand it. Thankfully, the avionics facility outside of Breslau has already opened and started its research on radar technology, but it has also gained valuable insight in aircraft technology. Enough for us to begin developing a new fighter aircraft together with Messerschmitt. While waiting for this and our tank developments, we turn to something long forgotten, our economy, because with new technology in excavation and machine tools, we are ready to reach the economic miracle we are so close to achieve. Regarding the excavation technologies, they allowed our German steel industry to massively increase their efficiency, which in turn led to more resources for our other industries and more exports. To accompany this, we even enacted more relaxed trade laws. But before we started the planned agricultural reforms, our first tanks entered production and we started training 6 panzer divisions. These will change a lot in the future, but at the moment we don't have the time, because we need to start acting on our Brest-Litovsk claims right now, as the Soviets have already expanded into Estonia, Latvia and even Finland. And with war having broken out between the Communist Union of Britain and the Italian fascists, our own expansion will hopefully be neglected by the French. We hurried as quickly as possible to send demands for Memel to Lithuania, but the Soviets were faster and annexed the whole nation only a few days before our demands were sent. In a moment of disbelief, we sent the demands to the Soviet instead, expecting nothing, but to our surprise they caved in and allowed us to reinstate Memel as a German state. Following this, with our army having reached 950,000 deployed men, we had enough to demand our former German states in Poland. But right before it was sent, the Hungarian People's Republic declared war on Romania, who dragged in France and Czechoslovakia, our ally. Thankfully, the Czechoslovaks didn't call us in, so we could restore our focus on Poland. With us outnumbering the Polish army significantly, they had no choice but to accept our demands when they arrived, leading to the eastern border of the German Empire being restored. But our goal isn't to restore the empire, it's to unite Europe, so while we were at it we demanded further concessions from the Polish, but this time they rejected, which means war. But we won't be the only major power fighting against the Polish. Our arch nemesis, the Soviets, will also join in, because one of the former Nazi diplomats reached out to us from prison with a bold plan. His name is Joachim von Ribbentrop, and after a month of work he had normalized relations with the Soviets, signed a trade agreement and even a non-aggression pact with them. All this might seem counterintuitive, since they are our greatest enemy, but this will allow us to, after the fall of Poland, focus on the West and only strike the Soviets in the back once we've united Western Europe in our European Union. And so, once the Soviets claimed Eastern Poland, we declared war on the surrounded nation. It was our 6 newly deployed tank divisions who initiated the war, and under command of Heinz Guderian we attacked towards Lodz. Supported by our heavy infantry, we soon broke through the Polish lines, spelling an end to their defensive opportunities, because with only plains ahead of us, we quickly arrived to Lodz and only a few days later Warsaw, the Polish capital. From here we turned south, shortly arriving to their last big city of Krakow. Together with an infantry offensive from Katowice, we encircled a bunch of troops, leading to Polish casualties reaching over 200,000 and their capitulation progress reached over 75%. So to finish them off, we launched all-out offensives across the front, which first resulted in the fall of Plock and then more south on the front the encirclement and eventual capture of Lvov. The fall of this last city caused the Polish government to capitulate and we could impose the borders which Ribbentrop had drawn up together with his Soviet counterpart Molotov. This meant giving away all of eastern Poland to the Soviets while creating our own supervised state in the rest of the country. During this war we had worked to prepare for our shift to the west, both militarily but also in search for a way to justify these wars. Luckily, war with the British Union can easily be justified. All we have to do is join the war against the Hungarian communists who have allied with the Brits. But war against the French and the Benelux nation needed to bypass the Maginot Line will be harder to justify. The solution will be found outside of Europe, their colonies, since we will be able to hide our European ambitions with colonial ones. To make it all more believable, we declared the start of a second naval race against the Brits and French, investing into the Kriegsmarine, while in reality only planning to build new high-tech submarines that will only help in trade interdiction and not in any naval battles. While waiting for the submarine tech to research and the construction of a naval engineering facility in Holstein, we returned to the economic reforms that were halted with the war in Poland. You might remember that it was agricultural reforms, and they are coming in handy now as a large part of our country is overbuilt. And this was actually the last reform before we finally could declare the economic wonder a reality. We have indeed fully recovered from the MIFO build debacle, which means we for once can militarize properly. And this came in handy immediately because we had finally decided to join the war against Hungary and the communist London. Destroying the little Hungarian resistance left was incredibly simple, as all we had to do was defeat the defenses of Győr. But more than this, us joining the war caused the chain reaction of countries joining different factions. Both France and Romania asked to join ours, but we only accepted the Romanian request, since the French are far too proud to then be integrated into the union we have in mind, something only war can solve. So, feeling betrayed, they instead joined forces with the fascist Latin bloc of Italy and Spain, which prompted Yugoslavia to join them as well. And so, the previous small front against the French has grown substantially. Also, Pakistan joined us. But we are not to be deterred by this large front. With our economic wonder, we've already enacted war mobilization and close to 1 million men are in training to cover this new front. We've also doubled our tank force, and the fighter aircraft, which previously was in the design stage, has already entered production, with more than 6 being produced per day. We've even developed an incredibly expensive heavy bomber. And so, February of 1941, we declared war on France and Belgium, for colonial purposes of course. While all their allies joined immediately, ours didn't, but this doesn't bother us, since we are planning offensives in Belgium anyways. Revisiting the Schlieffen plan, we will break through the Ardennes forest and continue to Paris from there. Despite the big number of Belgian forces on our small border of Eupen, with several vectors of attack and 6 panzer divisions, we were able to capture the province nonetheless, opening up for a breakthrough in the Ardennes. We quickly flooded the area with troops, and with little more than a week we had captured the whole forest and started attacks towards Sedan and across the Maas River. With little supplies in the forest, however, we quickly lost these battles and soon decided to retreat at least our tanks back to Germany to prepare for war with the Dutch instead. However, any war with the Netherlands wasn't needed for the Belgians to surrender, because their king did that for us, allowing us to establish a supervised state. But the French didn't just let us capture the nation for free, and they themselves marched in, starting a short scramble for Belgium. Since the French were severely underprepared, however, this battle was quickly won by us, as we had sent in our whole tank force. So we could now initiate the second stage of the old Schlieffen plan, going to Paris. With still no French divisions present, our panzer force could drive into Nord-Pas-de-Calais almost uncontested, opening up the road to the French capital. Even if a few defensive divisions now started to trickle in, it was already too late, and the sound of panzers could soon be heard on the Champs-Élysées. With the state of French politics already in chaos before we captured the city, the French government now fully collapsed with the fall of it, leading to a vacuum similar to that in Belgium, except at a larger scale. Since this time even the communist British partook, as they had landings in Normandy even before we joined this war. Since there was so much empty land to secure, we gave our infantry armies the orders to simply advance everywhere, while we focused our tank force against the British. With them not being prepared for this vacuum, they almost immediately started sending in more troops, but with our panzers heading straight for every port, their reinforcements never managed to arrive in time. And with their units already in France also being spread out and quite weak, they didn't stand any chance to stop us from capturing the ports. So eventually we had reached all the way to Bordeaux, kicked the communists out of mainland Europe and established a coherent front with the Latin bloc. With this, the next stage of the war began. The war against the Latin bloc has been won, and we stand as the ruler of Western mainland Europe. In all countries of the Alliance, we established supervised states, except in Yugoslavia where the Brits have seized control. While our infantry will work on defeating these new governments, I can tell you about a lot of other stuff that occurred during the Latin bloc war. Closely related to it, a fascist uprising occurred in the Netherlands, and since these fascists allied themselves with the bloc, we could ally with the Dutch government, helping them defeat this rebellion and unbeknownst to them signing them up for our European dream without a war. And this dream is now closer than ever, not only due to our victory in the war, but also since we've started working towards it. It started with introducing a scientific corporation sphere for our faction, which not only led to faster research, but with industrialists joining in as well, important production know-how was also shared between our nations. We then started working towards economic unity, the most important part. We did this by forming the Mitteleuropa Customs Union, opening up complete free trade with our allies, leading to new investments across our faction, like infrastructure development in Romanian oil fields. But there was even more stuff that occurred. After the British had been kicked out of mainland Europe, we put in action a plan to isolate their island. With our newly built submarines, we started raiding their trade convoys, inflicting important losses of resources for them. We also sent the Luftwaffe over to England, establishing air superiority due to their inferior fighters, which allowed our strategic bombers to begin decimating their airfields, giving us an even bigger edge. And last of all, we had started upgrading our panzer divisions, researching and starting production on mechanized infantry to replace their motorized, in addition to research on a new tank chassis. With the economic union already successful so far, we can move even further and actually begin to integrate our allies' economy into ours. And with them all accepting this integration, it is time to realize our dream of a European confederation. In Berlin, we started construction on a massive Volkshalle to replace the Reichstag, and as the construction started, we began fully integrating our European allies. Starting in the west, integration of our French, Italian and Belgian supervised states was quickly taken care of, as we easily could annex them and merge their small armies with ours. Netherlands took a while longer, however, as we first had to make them a puppet. But eventually they too were integrated, leaving only one thing before we can realize European unity: Luxembourg. They might have tried staying as silent as possible, but we haven't missed them. And even if we can't really justify a war with them, no one will notice if we drive in with our tanks. So we could now form our union, the European Federation. With coring of our new lands complete, our industry and resources grew to us being by far the strongest nation in the world. And this leaves only one thing left disregarding the British communists, turning to the east into the Soviet Union. It will take some time to prepare, but by spring of 1943, in half a year, we should be ready to destroy the heart of the communist movement. While waiting, we further increased economic integration in the east now, puppeting both Czechoslovakia and Romania, while in the west fully integrating Spain and Portugal into our federation. And soon the wait was over. 144 heavy infantry divisions, 18 of our now far more modern panzer divisions, and a big part of the Luftwaffe stand ready. With the Americans also already in the Baltics invading the Soviets due to their invasion of Sweden, it is time to break our several-year-long Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and declare war on the leader of communism. Using our knowledge of what was previously Eastern Poland, we launched a panzer offensive straight away in Lvov, something which caught the Red Army so off guard we were able to easily break through and utilize the fact that they had no defenses in depth to encircle a huge number of Soviet forces concentrated in Stanislav. While it took time to defeat them, since we had forgotten to deploy the Luftwaffe, once they were all killed or captured, we had caused over 500,000 casualties to the Soviets already, and we haven't even entered their core territory yet. Which we decided to begin to do now as we launched 3 panzer attacks. All 3 had a rough start, but once our infantry joined the offensives, at least the last attack started picking up speed as our tanks also received enough supply. And so the capital of the Ukrainian SSR was captured, the first big city captured by us. With the other 2 offensives in the north not as successful, however, we decided to turn further south to capture the rest of Ukraine. With the fields in Ukraine ideal for our panzer divisions, we quickly broke through their defensive lines, so in the matter of a few short days we arrived to the Black Sea encircling all Soviet forces in Odessa. It was quite a rough combat to then destroy these encircled forces, as at one point some even broke out, but eventually they had all been defeated, leaving Ukraine mostly unprotected. Which then allowed us to capture everything west of the Dnipro here in the south, and even cross it to capture Crimea and Sevastopol. Now, even if the Soviets are only 15% towards capitulation, let's jump into our panzers, turn on the music and drive to Moscow, forcing the end of this communist regime. The Soviet Union has been defeated and our new borders span from Portugal to Azerbaijan, with a supervised state established in the rest of Russia. This also means we will integrate our Polish, Czech and Romanian puppets, as they have now served their use against the Soviets. But despite the fall of the Soviet Union, the Union of Britain isn't our only enemy left, because at the end of the war, Sweden declared war on us, dragging in their ally from across the pond, the Americans. This might seem scary, since the Americans are indeed the second greatest power after us, but they are far weaker than they look, and one strike could get them out of the war. This is because the American public's support of the government's war in Europe is already extremely low. So if we bring the war to them, it would collapse to zero and lead to them drawing themselves out of this war. Fortunately, we have just the thing for this, what our scientists call the America Bomber. And this is not a new aircraft, we've had it in production since before the start of the Soviet war, so we not only have 2000 deployed already, but they have been proven effective too. So in a matter of around a month, the whole nation of the USA was flooded with bombers, destroying everything from factories to railroads. Together with convoy raiding, their war support has been lowered under 10%, meaning a final strike would force them to the negotiation table. And meanwhile at home we had prepared to defeat the British in a similar but more radical way. Because in all secrecy in the mountains of Austria we have constructed a nuclear research facility which developed nuclear reactors leading to the creation of the nuclear fission bomb. So remember to click the link in the description if you're interested in the new DLC Götterdämmerung, and see you in the next video.